I'd now like to request our Vice Chancellor, who is chairing this lecture today, to address the audience.
First of all, on behalf of the university, let me welcome Father Abraham Lotha for accepting our invitation to come over here and give a Silver Jubilee lecture on Nations Within Nations, Living Dialogues on Governance and Culture. I appreciate the efforts taken by the Silver Jubilee Lecture Committee to identify a very distinguished speaker and also for identifying a very important and relevant topic, again, in the context of Indira Gandhi National Open University's activities during the last 25 years in the field of inclusive growth. He has been introduced. Many of you may be knowing Father Abraham Lotha. He is a PhD in anthropology and he is teaching sociology, and he has been quite active in interacting with several civil society organizations working at the grassroots. In addition to being a very effective teacher, he has been working with socially relevant activities through several organizations. Indira Gandhi National Open University in its Silver Jubilee year is proud to have such eminent people coming here and interacting with us. I also take the opportunity to appreciate the performance made by the students from the northeastern region. Indira Gandhi National Open University has special interest in education and skill development of the northeastern region. We have a good presence and we have very focused activities towards the northeast. Probably if you just look at the study center density in the northeastern region, we can see that it is very high, and even now we are adding several institutions into the fold. We have recently started, with the help of the Ministry of Culture, the Northeastern Zonal Cultural Center. With the support of the Northeastern Zonal Cultural Center, we have started a certificate program of indigenous or traditional art practices in the northeastern region. We are also looking at various types of Aboriginal knowledge and skills in this area, and then try to protect as well as promote such activities. Indira Gandhi National Open University's recent additions and recent activities in terms of schools, in terms of programs and all that, if you just have a look at the cross-section of such programs, we can very well see that we are looking at maybe intercultural studies, looking at maybe cultures within the culture, and several type of activities. The overall emphasis is to improve the quality of life and life management systems, as I used to say quite often. And this university, for the knowledge, of course, he has some sort of an awareness about in the Indira Gandhi National Open University, but for the benefit of the speaker, this university during the last 25 years, it has been a real success story in democratization of education and training. And we also believe that only by focusing on the local cultures, local traditions, and the local requirements, the real growth of a country like India, so diverse a country like India, can be achieved. And your lecture today would be definitely contributing. And in addition to hearing your lecture, we would also be looking at action points, how a university of this kind or how education institutions of this kind what they can do in achieving the real growth of this country, respecting the diverse cultures and traditions of the land. Thank you very much.
And now may I request Father Abraham Lotha to deliver the 10th Silver Jubilee lecture.
I'm very honored to be here in your presence today, in the presence of successful people. I've heard a lot about IGNOU, and I have my colleagues who are undergoing some courses in IGNOU, but it never struck me that I would be so involved with IGNOU, particularly my being here today. And I'm very proud and honored that I've been invited to give this speech. When I told this news to some of the Naga people, they said, "Don't go empty-handed." And so I took to heart their advice, and I brought a small gift for the university. Professor, the Vice Chancellor, this is a Naga vest we would like to offer you. To the Pro-Vice Chancellor, to remind you of Nagas carry you in our hearts. Naga bag. I remember when I was young, in class 2, remember reading cowboy comics. Later on in college, it graduated into watching cowboy movies. And one of the movies I watched was the movie called The Outlaw, Josey Wales. It's a revisionist tale of American Civil War, and Josey Wales is a soldier who refuses to surrender after the war. As he runs from being caught, Josey Wales comes upon the fierce Comanche who felt that the government reneged on treaties. Josey Wales meets 10 Bears, the chief of the Comanche, to negotiate with him on peaceful coexistence. The following dialogue takes place between Josey Wales and 10 Bears. 10 Bears says, "These things you say we will have, we already have." And Josey Wales says, "That's true. I ain't promising you nothing extra. I'm just giving you life and you are giving me life. And I'm saying that men can live together without butchering one another." 10 Bears replies, "It is sad that governments are achieved by double tongues. There is iron in your words of death for all Comanche to see, so there is iron in your words of life. No signed paper can hold the iron. It must come from men." The words of 10 Bears carries the same iron of life and death. It is good that warriors such as we meet in the struggle of life or death. It shall be life. On September 15, 2010, in New Delhi, addressing the all-party meeting to discuss about the dilution of the Armed Forces Special Powers Act in Kashmir, Sonia Gandhi invited all members to arrive at a suitable decision to break the vicious cycle of violence and suffering. And she says, "Why is there so much pain amongst the youth in particular? We must give them hope. We must understand and respect their legitimate aspirations. We need to be magnanimous and mature in our approach as befits a strong, confident, and inclusive democracy." She also further added that the Congress Party is more than willing to support a process of healing and dialogue in partnership. And I thought those words are very profound, healing and dialogue in partnership. Sonia Gandhi's statement is an example of how a multi-ethnic state such as India governs the nations within the nation. But what do such rhetoric say about governance and state building? Why are we talking about such language after 7 decades of nationhood? Are there ideological and political differences crippling the governance? How hopeful should we be of a positive resolution? India's nation-building policy to contain and integrate the numerous ethnic groups or nations has been crystallized in the familiar slogan, "Unity in Diversity," envisioned by the founding father Nehru. Yet, how successful has India been in this nation-building endeavor, especially in the current context of globalization that seems to indirectly reinforce ethnic identities which have at times led to tensions with the state. I just came to know that IGNOU is very forward in a grassroots approach, the dynamism of the university in trying to find out the cultural resources of the people. Let's say the certificate course on indigenous art and culture in the Northeast or in various parts of the country, to find out what resources are there for the people, that the people have, so we can be used for the well-being of the people. And that's exactly what this lecture is about. How do we find out resources, cultural resources that can help in governance? Nations and nationalism, as we know them today, are of modern origin. Even more recent are post-colonial states such as India. Among scholars on nationalism, there are those who are proponents of internal factors as the predominant criteria that create nations and nationalism. And those there are who propose different external elements as the primary factors responsible for nations and nationalism. These various approaches to nations and nationalism in a way find expression, political expression, in two broad types of nationalism: ethnic nationalism and civic nationalism. Though not strictly, the former emphasizes the essentialist characters of nations, while the latter, influenced by the ideals of enlightenment, emphasizes the secular, rationalist, and constructed nature of nations. We may say Germany, Italy, Japan are examples of ethnic nationalism, while Britain, France, and the United States are examples of civic nationalism. Among the various types of civic nationalism are those that are multi-ethnic in character, which are comprised of different groups, ethnic groups, or non-state nations that are within nations, also called nations without states. Multi-ethnic communities or multi-ethnic groups is what defines the Indian character of the Indian state. But unlike nationalism of the West, India lacked the essential ingredients of nationality when the nation was first formed. Elements like a common language, a common religious tradition, and a historically shared experience by the majority of the people were lacking. Yet, the common shared experience was British colonialism, and it was their primary objective to overthrow their enemy, the British. They may have had different strategies, even fought each other as it happened between the Muslims and the Hindus, but yet they had to fight a common enemy. And so nationalism, national unity of India was formed as anti-colonial invention of nationalist movement. In spite of the absence of a cultural homogeneity, such as a common language or a religious tradition, Indian nationalism succeeded in gaining independence from the British, which, according to Francis Robinson, said, the achievement of no colonial nationalist movement is as striking as that of the Indian National Congress. The multi-ethnic composition is thus an important element of the Indian state. But India is not exactly a civic state where the individual is the ultimate. It is a union of ethnic groups. Dr. Ambedkar even considered India to be a union of states instead of a federation. Some elements in India try to make India into a homogeneous nation state, but that is being unrealistic, given the reality that we know. The reality is that there are tensions sometimes between the ethnic communities or between the nations or ethnic states, ethnic groups, and the center. For example, the Bodos, the Meiteis, Assamese, Kashmir, Nagas included. Many of the ethnic groups in India have a strong, staunch ethnic identity, but are they also equally staunch Indian? And here comes to the theme of the Silver Jubilee lectures, inclusion of the excluded. And here also I'd like to say about the perspective of the alienated. The summary of the theory of nationalism and nation states leads to an inevitable conclusion. For post-colonial multi-ethnic states, successful technologies of governance and nation building require more than the recognition and acceptance of the different ethnicities or nations within the state. The process involves a conscious political will for the inclusion of the excluded, or those that feel marginalized or alienated. To do this, one has to see from the perspective of the excluded. It calls for a close collaboration with the people most affected. India's Northeast has gained notoriety of being a region defined by insurgencies and political unrest amplified by the state. And I'm taking this as a case example of one of the regions that feels alienated. Ignorance about the Northeast still exists in mainland India. The third type of sovereignty they have is the national indigenous space, such as the National Museum of the American Indian in Washington, D.C., which reflects a common experience of the indigenous peoples in the Americas. The fourth type of sovereignty is dual citizenship, or a hybrid political space in which tribal citizenship and U.S. citizenship are not mutually exclusive. I know India also has the overseas citizenship policy. It is not what is given or gained in negotiations between states, but rather the act of negotiating and the act of being able to negotiate that determines sovereignty. So the flexibility of the state to innovate and explore different types of state sovereignty is shown, for instance, in China's one nation, two system for Hong Kong as special administrative region, which is directly under the authority of the Central People's Government of the People's Republic of China. And we think that China is very rigid, and yet they are able to innovate such exercises in sovereignty. Because of India's respect for different religions and ethnic identities within the state, the task for India is not so much to build a homogeneous nation state, but a strong integrated state. The challenge for India is to become the challenge for India is to complement the strong ethnic identity with an equally, if not more, strong national identity. The concept of dialogue as partners provides a respectful framework that can give fruition to successful governance. And the dialogue as partners is a real cultural resource that we have in India. There has to be good intentions from all parties and certain goals set. And it is apt that such living dialogues are initiated by academic institutions such as IGNOU and others that have close proximity to the policymakers of the state. To manage the world's largest university with 1.8 million students, 15% of the country's students, 12 million students, sounds like an insurmountable task. Yet, IGNOU has been able to do justice because of its ingenuity in harnessing the technological revolution, especially web-based and satellite-based education, which now seem like a normal thing to do. And IGNOU can rightly proclaim, ain't no task big enough. Recently, an American friend of mine said about India, the theme for India is change. It is forward-looking. Such a forward attitude is concretized in IGNOU's mantra, age no bar, place no bar, pace no bar, to which I may add nations or ethnic groups no bar. But mantras are one thing, action is another. When government to government, government to people, people to people, nations within nations, and nations to nations are dialoguing as partners, respectfully, then IGNOU's effectiveness as a felicitator will be realized. Now is the time to talk. Now the time for inaction has long passed. As Franklin Field said, poor eyes limit your sight. Poor vision limits your deeds. Thank you.
I'd now like to request Dr. Vaidya to make her observations.
Father Lotha's lecture today is of a piece with the intense engagement of social scientists over the past 30 years on the issues of ethnicity, nationalism, and identity. Father Lotha is an anthropologist, and anthropology really offers a vantage point with which to understand the constructed nature of identities. We are all implicated in each other's lives. We are all part and parcel of the same reality, and our interactions and transactions are really the stuff of ethnographic and anthropological discourse and research. In this context of the Northeast, there are two parallel trends that we can really observe and which we have gleaned from Father Lotha's talk. There is the process of identity assertion on the one hand, and at the same time there is a drive towards participation, towards integration with the mainstream of what Father Lotha calls mainland India. Participation in development, education, democratic institutions, and media representations have, in a sense, made the Northeast much more real to us, much more amenable to us, much more accessible. However, I think the entire wave of modernization, the opening up of travel, the opening up of tourism, the opening up of different sites where cultures can meet and interact, has really reduced this gap, or has reduced this gap of perception between them and us. I just asked a group of 13 to 18-year-old young children what the word Northeast really connoted to them. They included Bhaichung Bhutia, Mary Kom, and the Delhi Heart. I think Bhaichung Bhutia and Mary Kom really epitomize the aspirational agenda of a new generation. It is the youth of today that I think has really transcended or is really beyond the us-them kind of dichotomy, who are much more in synchronization with the different ethnic groupings that are there in India, because they have the opportunity to actually interact with each other. They have the opportunity actually to visit, to travel. And these cultural icons, these new icons in the shape of someone like Bhaichung or someone like Mary Kom, who as a woman I too am extremely proud of, I think really symbolize the agenda or the aspirational agenda of a new India. And this is something that is very, very welcome. Delhi Heart is a common urban space where city dwellers or people visiting the city walk in, walk out, and acquaint themselves with cultures that up to that point had been alien to them. The idea of India, the common dream, is something that all of us are increasingly beginning to share. And I think the political process and the democratic institutions of which this country can be very, very proud of really facilitate this process. And I, for one, firmly believe in the Nehruvian ideal of university in diversity. Father Lotha has outlined some of the very different and interesting ways in which these can be conceptualized and actualized, and how local aspirations need not fly in the face of what he calls centrist tendencies or centrist control. The bedrock, the glue that really should bind this nation together are shared ideas of democracy, citizenship, and a basic responsibility towards the greater good of the nation. Lastly, let me say that we as teachers in IGNOU, we as an IGNOU community, our entire commitment is towards inclusion of the excluded. A commitment I think that we are all very, very proud of, a commitment that we have been honoring for the past 25 years. And really, this inclusion of the excluded, this reaching out to those who are denied access to the goods of the mainstream, is the agenda that we should wholeheartedly pursue in the coming years. Thank you so much.
Now I'd like to request the convener of the Silver Jubilee Lecture Committee, Professor Lata Pillai, to give the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Lotha, for that tip of the iceberg perspective into what the Northeast is. You spoke of issues of ethnicity, of spaces of people, and also of living dialogues. Most importantly, community engagement in developing policy and in finding solutions to the various conflicts. We're thankful to you for your time, and and I must say that, quote unquote, we from the mainland definitely appreciate your perspectives and your problems, and IGNOU will definitely go that extra mile to see that our efforts in the Northeast, at least on the academic front, is as per the needs of the community there. Thank you, Dr. Shubhangi Vaidya, for providing us that external perspective to the talk, something that Dr. Lotha was so passionate about. I'd also like to thank the Vice Chancellor for his support in the conduct of this series of lectures. Central to the conduct of this lecture, we have a steering committee comprising of few young people from the IGNOU family, Dr. Babu Ramesh, Dr. Shashidhar, Dr. Malti Mathur, Professor Saluja, who untiringly try and identify speakers, see that things are in place, and that the lecture goes on as per schedule. For this particular lecture, we had the initiative of a group of 3 people from the campus, Dr. Dolly Matthew, Dr. Ajay Mahurkar, and Dr. Yantan, who suggested the speaker and did all that they could in corresponding and seeing that the program could be finalized. Thank you for your efforts in this endeavor. I'd also like to thank the faculty and administration who have responded to our invitation, the administration for the support in the conduct of this program, and of course the students and artists who've come to give us this cultural program from the Northeast. Thank you one and all.